Right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll let anybody who's late running in as we go. Thank you for joining us bright and early. Joining us for a city centre transport briefing. So, as per usual Zoom discipline, please make sure you're on mute. If you've got any questions, ask them through the chat, as we've got spotlit speakers and 30 people in so far and a few more to join, I think. So if you're going to ask any questions through me, this is being recorded and it will go onto our YouTube channel afterwards, which has thousands and thousands of subscribers, as you can imagine, the CityCo YouTube channel, growing all the time. So we've got two presentations today. One from Jonathan Marsh, who's Strategic Planning Manager with TFGM on the city centre's transport strategy. And then the second from Megan Black, who's Head of Logistics and Environment, which is on the clean air strategy and the clean air plan, both of which hopefully you already know a little bit about, as we have been talking about them in various briefings for a considerable amount of time, I think. So we'll get underway. Jonathan, have you got a presentation?
Yes, yeah, I'll just
able to
share my screen.
Excellent, thank you.
That's come through okay.
Yep.
Great, okay. Yep, good morning everyone. As everyone said, yeah, Jonathan Marsh from Transport for Greater Manchester. Working with TFGM, have been working with Manchester City Council and Salford City Council on developing the city centre transport strategy for a number of years now, building on the previous city centre transport strategy. So I've just got a few slides just to take you through an overview really of the draft city centre transport strategy, and yeah, I'll run through those and then happy to have a discussion and take any questions at the end of the slides. So we launched the consultation on the draft city centre transport strategy on the 23rd of September. As I said, yeah, it's a joint production from two city councils and TFGM, and has followed input from residents, commuters, businesses, visitors, transport operators and other stakeholders to understand the existing transport challenges and also the future aspirations for the city centre, and particularly for those that use it each day. So we've had input from stakeholders at various stages, from early engagement exercises through to a conversation that we had in summer 2018, and then some co-design engagement sessions that we had in the winter last year. As I said, the new draft city centre transport strategy builds on the last version, which was adopted in 2010 and guided many of the transformative schemes that were being delivered over the last 10 years. For example, Metrolink's second city crossing, the Oxford Road bus and cycle enhancements, the redevelopment of St Peter's Square into that high quality pedestrian environment, and also some major infrastructure around rail and continuing investment in active travel. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the plans that set out in the strategy very much on how city centre can lead a strong, sustainable, healthy and inclusive recovery, taking forward the achievements made from the last city centre transport strategy to the next level, and continuing many of the policies set out. And as the slide shows, very much doing that in the context of a growing population within the city centre, and lots of planned developments happening to increase the number of people living and working in the city centre. And that is still the long-term aspiration of the two cities. There will also be major planned transport investments, some of the quite long-term planning going on into that, so whether that's HS2 or whether it's Northern Powers Rail or other investments, and I'll run through some of that. And also we know that the role transport plays will change as innovations in how transport supports people travelling around the country, Greater Manchester, the city centre. And therefore we'll need to do that also within the context of growing numbers of people within the city centre. When we talk about the city centre, it is quite a strange area. It's broader than what's perhaps traditionally been looked at in terms of generally the area within the Manchester Salford inner relief route, the ring road around the city centre. It now extends up into Salford Central, up towards the Crescent and the University of Salford, out to the east into areas like Ancoats and New Islington, and also down the Oxford Road corridor as well, the university's hospitals area in particular. So it is that broad area, and it was very much being used in that in terms of for planning purposes, whether that's the local plans or the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. So we summarised the vision, and I think we've shared this vision statement with you in other sessions that we've had on city centre transport strategy for that well-connected, zero-carbon city centre at the heart of the north, offering our visitors, employees, and visitors a great place to work, live, and visit. And to do that, we've got two main central aims. One is around reducing the number of vehicle trips coming into the city centre during particularly the peak periods. So the target for that is for 90% of morning peak trips to be made by walking, cycling, and public transport before 2040. And also particularly within the city centre for walking to be the main way that people travel around the city centre. So that's very much in support of the right mix vision set out in the Greater Manchester Transport Strategy 2040, which is aiming for 1 million more sustainable transport journeys every day by 2040. And clearly that's it is looking at nearly doubling of people walking, cycling, and using public transport to accommodate that growth. So to support that, we've set out these 7 ambitions, very much multimodal and placemaking ambitions. I'd emphasise the central aim around walking. We want the city centre to be cleaner and less congested, and that very much is supporting and aligned with the Clean Air Plan consultation and the plans which Megan will talk about after this. Want more people to choose to cycle to destinations within the city centre, and that's very much building on what's been set out through the Made to Move agenda, and what Chris Boardman has been promoting around active travel across Greater Manchester. To accommodate a great deal of the movement and travel into the city centre, we need public transport to continue to play a vital role in getting people into and across the city centre. So we need those better public transport connections. And in that supporting role of reducing the number of vehicles coming into the city centre, clearly the role that parking plays will be very key in that, and looking at making the city centre parking offer smarter and better integrated. And I'll run through some of the proposals around that shortly. Clearly, to keep the city centre vibrant and supporting particularly businesses and residents, we need the goods and servicing to be sufficient, sustainably and efficiently working for the city centre. So for vehicles to be cleaner, but also for them to be able to access the city centre efficiently as well. And innovation as well, as I said earlier, we know transport will evolve over the next 10, 20 years. So we need to make sure that those innovations are very much supporting the city centre grow, but also not having impacts on particular users as well. So these next couple of slides just summarise some of the key proposals that we've set out in the strategy, and we've summarised them and part of these 5 main areas, very much again aligned with the 2040 transport strategy in terms of these main areas of bus, Metrolink, rail, streets, and our integrated network. And we see the proposals, some being measures that will be delivered in the shorter term, in the next few years. Others will be work that requires us to do more planning and development of, to deliver over a longer period of time, and as we secure more funding as well to deliver these proposals. Some of the measures, be helping tackle the recovery from the pandemic, but also others again supporting that longer term growth and plans for the city centre. The proposals reflect the desire to improve the quality and ease of movement within the city centre, making streets and spaces better places, and ensuring that the city centre is a great place to spend time in. But also very much supporting the need to shift towards that zero carbon city centre, which has cleaner air as well. So from the bus side of things, we've starting to engage with operators around these proposals, but we set out aspirations to look at improving streets and spaces, particularly with a focus on making them better for walking. So looking at potential changes around the Piccadilly Gardens area, opportunities to make better use of Shude Hill, and also longer term as Piccadilly Station becomes an even greater public transport hub and focus for activity in the city centre, potential for a new interchange in that location. We're particularly keen that bus plays that role in the shorter term, as it has a more flexible and adaptive role that can support getting people into and across the city centre by public transport. But we'll obviously continue, as we'd set out in those travel demand targets, and continue that role into the longer term. Also in the longer term, from a Metrolink perspective, we have, with the opening of the Trafford Park line, completed the last major investment in the Metrolink network. There are other planned developments continuing, some around the resilience of the network, but others how over longer term tram train can play a greater role. So potentially trams running on some of the suburban rail lines that we have across Greater Manchester. That could also support the connection to Salford Crescent as a Metrolink type connection as well, to improve that connectivity to the west of the city centre, and obviously serving a key growth area within the city centre as well. And then longer term, in terms of additional crossings of the city centre, we're looking more towards them being potentially tunnelled, and therefore could start to develop more of a metro type network in the serving Greater Manchester, but in particular the city centre area. But that's very much a longer term aspiration, which we're starting to work on now. In terms of rail, particularly nearer term, the investment we'd like to see in rail is more focused on reliability and the capacity of services. So we know there'll be need to invest in some infrastructure to support that as well. They're particularly measures that help people get into the city centre. Within the city centre, that the stations will play a key role, and they'll need to change and evolve as we have more footfall coming through those stations, particularly as we look forward to the arrival of HS2 and also potentially Northern Powerhouse Rail in the longer term. So there'll be important work that's going into planning for that over the coming years. I mentioned the streets and they're a particular focus of the city centre transport strategy, and particularly making streets better for people walking around the city centre, so potentially more pedestrian priority type zones, so areas of the city centre more devoted for people walking and spending time in, improving crossing points of some of the key streets as well, and there are proposals underway around Albert Square and planned further works and consultations around improvements to places like Piccadilly Gardens and Deansgate as well. From a cycling perspective, there are a number of committed cycling schemes within the city centre area, very much part of the B network and the Mayor's Cycling and Walking Challenge Funds. So they're being developed for implementation. Example being the scheme within the Northern Quarter and those in the central Salford area. Strategy also sets out aspirations to create a bit more of a core network within the city centre and potentially that city centre triangle of Deansgate, Whitworth Street, and then that route through the Northern Quarter that provides that more visible cycle connection across and within the city centre. And that's supported by measures that also help people get into the city centre as well. And within the city centre, that aspiration to make the city centre a lot better for walking and cycling through the fact that there'll be less traffic in the city centre and streets move to more of a 20 mile per hour speed vehicles as well. The final ones are around our integrated network, and clearly the strategy is aligned with what's coming forward through the Clean Air Plan. City Council made it clear that they'll look to investigate the potential for an ultra low emission zone within the city centre. So that's something that's will be developed going forwards. And I mentioned also about the importance of deliveries and servicing needs. So particularly looking at that in terms of key routes within the city centre, the roles and importance of particular curbside space as well to accommodate that. And then from a transport innovations, there's the e-scooters trial that's happening at Salford University at the moment. So that's potentially testing it for maybe wider rollout across Greater Manchester. And from a parking perspective, more multimodal type facilities being developed if new parking locations that are being provided in the forms of travel hubs that offer access to the city centre by other modes, potentially integrating it with electric vehicle charging, access to cycling facilities, cycle hire facilities and other facilities within those locations. This next slide relating to the proposals is summarising in a map form many of those proposals, and that's included within the city centre transport strategy documents that's provided. So very much outlining those measures that are looking to be brought forward over the next, particularly the next 5 to 10 years, but also longer term as well. And the style of mapping's consistent with that in the 2040 transport strategy delivery plan as well. So just to I suppose summarise and outline the next steps. We've got the consultation closing a week today on the 4th of November. The information's available at the Manchester City website, and there's a survey there, which be great if you haven't already, you could complete. We've been engaging through the consultation periods with key stakeholders, and that will clearly continue after the closing of the more public-facing consultation, because we realise that the strategy is setting a direction for the city centre, but many of the proposals will need more direct engagement with stakeholders as they move into more of a delivery phase. And the intention is to publish and adopt the final version of the city centre transport strategy early next year, taking the feedback from the consultation, the further engagement sessions that we'll be having with stakeholders, and then publishing that final version in early 2021. So be grateful that if you could continue, as I'm sure you have been, to share details of the consultations with others, and if there are any other stakeholder groups that you recommend we are engaging with, then we're interested to find out about those groups as well. So I'm happy to pause there and take any questions.
So we've got a few questions that have come through, so I'll just run through. I mean, the first one from me is there's an asterisk on that map that said sort of subject to funding, which is always the big question. How much is currently funded, and how much, given that you're looking up till 2040 and beyond, I guess, how much are we likely to see of this in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and so on?
Yeah, there's a few things that are committed within that, and that's summarised within the documentations. I probably couldn't put percentages on it, but as I'm sure you'd appreciate it, there's a high percentage that we would definitely need funding for, particularly because of some of the more longer term, more expensive investments that would be required. And we think that this puts us in a great place, to articulate to those government and others that can fund the investment that we think is needed within the city centre transport strategy. So we're ready when that funding becomes available, and clearly at the Greater Manchester level, having conversations with government around more of a longer term funding settlement that can invest in some of these particular interventions.
Running through some of the questions, talked about reducing the car parking spaces within the city centre. That presumably leaves then the outer ring of car parks that are mostly operated by NCP and will continue to be operated by NCP, I believe. I mean, are there plans for those to stay in place, and then within the city centre ring itself to be reliant on public transport, cycles, foot, and so on?
Yes, I think that's the general direction, is for more of the car parking to be on the periphery of the city centre. Clearly, that needs to be balanced with the residents or the communities in those areas. But that helps with obviously reducing the number of vehicles needing to be in the city centre. In terms of the ownerships of the car parks, there's a mix, and I know the city council are working on that plan to how parking will work in the city centre going forward.
And then around the movement of the bus passenger terminus, so potentially getting rid of where we are in Piccadilly Gardens, and then moving to Piccadilly Station, making more use of Shude Hill. I think the question is about what impact assessment has been carried out on that. Certainly when Shude Hill was originally created, there was a desire for a huge number of bus lines to go in there, and actually passengers just didn't want to use it. So it became, I'm not going to say it's a white elephant, because there are buses running out of it, but not as many as were originally envisaged. So how much work has been done on actually knowing that buses are still going to be available where people want them?
Yeah, I've done some preliminary work around that, very much as a vision-led approach to particularly looking at that Piccadilly Gardens area and making it a better environment and a better city space. So we've only I suppose begun to work through that. I think it's very much an aspiration, nothing set in stone, and clearly there's a lot of work we'll need to do with stakeholders, particularly the bus operators, to work that through. That's all will all be linked, as we've said, to further investment in the network, particularly potentially that new interchange at Piccadilly Station. So some of the changes like that could be something more for the the longer term, but we're just starting those discussions with operators around how that could work. Clearly we see bus playing that vital role in getting people into and across the city centre. So we need to do this very much ensuring that things are future proofed to enable buses to still continue to get into the city centre, so that people can also get to easily to the right parts of the city centre as well, so that we're not necessarily pushing people out and creating significantly longer distances for people to walk to facilities. We clearly are trying to want to make streets better for people to walk around, so create that higher quality environment. So some of those distances that people might be walking are not necessarily perceived as being longer distances as well, because that environment is more attractive. There are more perhaps facilities along those routes as well that encourage people to walk more within the city centre.
And an interesting one around Oxford Road. Obviously, there's been some work on Oxford Road, but it is pretty obvious when you move from Oxford Road into the city centre, I think, and the sort of barrier there. Is there work going to take place to sort of integrate Oxford Road more with the city centre, make that a smoother process in terms of coming into the city?
Yes, I mean the investment that's gone into the Oxford Road corridor, from that bus and walking cycling perspective, has dramatically improved that area. Yes, there are some connections, perhaps particularly that connection from Oxford Road to the Piccadilly area, which I think is, through discussions we've had stakeholders, is a particular priority for improving connectivity and making that work better. But there will be plans undertaken to help with that, and very much working with stakeholders to look at those kind of opportunities.
Thank you. There's excuse me, final one from Graham Dixon around consolidation centres. I know it's been looked at a number of times in the past, and I've been involved in various committees looking at it a number of times in the past. Is that going to be part of the plan? The notion that you can have a consolidation centre on the M60, and then you'd have a smaller number of consolidated freight and also waste going out, I guess, vehicles coming in and out of the city centre.
Yeah, consolidations centres would definitely feature as part of that plan to make operations more efficient. So potentially limiting or reducing the number of vehicles that would be travelling into the city centre at particular times, because of the principles of what consolidation centres do. So yes, I think that's something that very much, well, city councils and we have freight and logistic colleagues within TFGM, but very much working with industry around exploring things like the clean air zone will potentially change how operations work for freight and logistics across the city centre. So I'm sure that will be something that will develop, and we're clearly keen to work with industry and stakeholders on those proposals.
Yeah, and just to fill in from previous discussions over the last decade, there have been a number of discussions. The holding point that's held us back from it has been very fractured ownership of businesses within the city centre. So unlike a Meadow Hall or even a West End, where you have a single landlord or a couple of landlords, actually getting enough tenants to agree to that process has been difficult. But also in the past and up to the last few years, actually, there was a problem with the shape of the city of Manchester itself, actually, where you put a consolidation centre and it would go into somebody else's authority. That's less of a problem now, because obviously all the authorities work together very well, and GM is brilliant at those sort of things. So all of those are much more possible. And yes, that was, speaking on behalf of city centre businesses and the city centre bid, one of the things we talk about a lot is, wouldn't it be great to do what the West End does and have little electric vehicles pootering in it, back in and out, bringing in supplies and taking out waste? We would absolutely adore to do that. And it may be that this is one of the things that comes out of the current situation, that we have to look at how we do the things differently in the future, and there is a big opportunity for that. So would love to be involved in some conversations on that actually go somewhere, as opposed to in the past banging our head slightly against a brick wall on it. Megan, do you want to move on to clean air? That would be really good.
Yeah, happy to. I think Laura's going to share the slide deck for me. So as was said before, I'm Megan Black from TFGM. I'm one of the people that are sponsoring the development of the Clean Air Plan on behalf of the 10 Greater Manchester authorities. So I've been along to one of these sessions before to talk about the development of the plan when we were having a conversation last year. Clearly that's now moved on, and we are now in a statutory consultation about the Clean Air Plan, and we're also in a consultation about GM's minimum licensing standards for taxi and private hire services. So today's presentation, if we want to move on, Laura, is just going to give you an oversight of the Clean Air Plan proposals. I'll touch on the minimum licensing standards consultation proposals as well. We'll talk about how to get involved, and at the end I'll take your questions. So if we move on, I think the thing to say is, as I've said when I've met you before, poor air quality is one of the largest environmental risks to public health in the UK. And it's estimated that air pollution contributes to the early deaths of around 1,200 people each year in Greater Manchester. So this slide is just to set out the impact of air quality on health through the different life stages that we go through. Clearly there's a higher risk for more vulnerable residents, particularly those people who spend time in areas or environments with high concentrations of air pollution, and particularly here thinking about professional drivers who spend many hours in a vehicle, and their vehicles takes in emissions from surrounding vehicles and recirculates it within the cabin. So if we move on, I'm not quite sure whether this will play, but we have got a little animation here of the proposals of the Clean Air Plan for you all just to see. Okay, so if we just move on, unfortunately there wasn't the sound attached to that animation, but hopefully you all managed to read the subtitles which talked about the work that we've done in developing the plan and the reasons why. So I'm not sure, Laura, whether you can move on to the next slide.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get it off this video slide.
Okay. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So I just wanted to take the time to talk you through the key elements of the clean air zone, because that is the thing that we're consulting upon right now, along with the funding packages that are proposed to support businesses upgrade to cleaner vehicles. So the clean air zone boundary is proposed as largely coincidental with the Greater Manchester administrative boundary, including the majority of roads. I think there's one road where we're proposing that it isn't included, a small portion of road in Stockport, and it excludes the strategic road network, which is managed by Highways England. We're proposing that the zone runs for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And the animation did set out that we anticipate the zone commencing in spring of 2022. And we anticipate that it will remain in full operation until at least the second half of 2026. Now, the reason for that is the whole aim of the Clean Air Plan is to remove the exceedances of nitrogen dioxide that are on the local road network across Greater Manchester. And we not only have to achieve that, i.e. comply by removing all those exceedances, we have to make sure that we can maintain compliance as well. And therefore, with 2 years level of data, we can show that Greater Manchester has removed those exceedances, and then we can remove the zone and start to decommission it. We are setting out that the vehicles that would be impacted would be licensed hackney carriages, licensed private hire vehicles, buses, coaches, minibuses, LGVs or vans, and heavy goods vehicles. Now, if you've got one of those vehicles and you're wondering whether your vehicle is impacted or not, then we have got a vehicle checker online at cleanairgm.com, which is where all of the information about the plan and the consultation can be found. And compliance is to do with the Euro rating of the vehicle. So there's, as I say, there's a vehicle checker that you can have a look there and see whether your vehicle would be impacted or not. So if we move on. The next thing just to highlight to you are the proposed charges, because with a clean air zone, we are talking about daily charges would apply for each day a non-compliant vehicle was used within the zone. One charged being imposed per vehicle per charging day, which we're stating would be midnight to midnight. So however much a vehicle drove within that zone within a 24-hour period, there would be that charge to pay. And it would be for the owners or registered keepers of the non-compliant vehicles having to pay the relevant charge via a central government payment portal. And that's because there are a number of cities across the country that are proposing to introduce clean air zones, and the government is putting together a central portal to handle payments for those people that are impacted. In terms of the charges for licensed hackney carriages and private hire vehicles, the proposal is a charge of £7.50 per day, and for minibuses and vans £10, and for buses, coaches and HGVs it's £60. Those charges have slightly changed compared to the conversation that we had last year, where we set out what we thought the charges might be, as we've got a better understanding of the vehicle fleets and markets in Greater Manchester and how people would likely respond to those charges as well. So we've tried to identify the lowest but most effective charge to get the necessary behaviour change of people moving to cleaner vehicles. So if we move forward, Laura. As part of a clean air zone, the framework is set by the government, and they say that you can introduce discounts and exemptions for certain types of vehicles. Now, the government do actually set exemptions for historic vehicles, military vehicles, disabled passenger vehicles and specialist emergency services vehicles, which we are also which we have to put forward as part of our clean air zone. So those will be permanent exemptions. But then what Greater Manchester is also doing, if we move forward, Laura, is proposing some local permanent exemptions around the vehicle types that you can see there. So they are set out in detail in the consultation material, but essentially we're saying that specialist heavy goods vehicles, non-road going vehicles, vehicles used by emergency services where it may not be generally practicable to upgrade, community minibuses, Showman's Guild vehicles and disabled tax class vehicles would have a permanent local exemption. And the other thing we're setting out is because Greater Manchester has got, we're proposing the zone covers the whole of the Greater Manchester region, and there is a large strategic road network running through that, primarily the M60. We're saying that if somebody ends up driving in the zone because of a road diversion off that strategic road network, there would be an exemption because they otherwise wouldn't have entered the GM zone. So if we move forward, we're also proposing some local exemptions, some temporary local exemptions until the end of December of 2022. And that's for coaches and buses registered to a business address within Greater Manchester, but not used on a registered bus service, in recognition of the types of journeys that they do for schools and other social activities. We're proposing exemptions for GM licensed wheelchair accessible hackney carriages and private hire vehicles. We're proposing exemptions around those persons that have already got outstanding finance or lease agreements on a non-compliant vehicle. And we're proposing that those exemptions run until the agreement ends or December 2022, whichever is sooner. We're also proposing an exemption for light goods vehicles or vans and minibuses, and the minibuses which aren't licensed hackneys or private hire vehicles, to the end of December 2022. And that's because of the concern we've got about the availability of compliant vehicles in the second-hand market. And we're also setting out where somebody has ordered a compliant vehicle, if there's a limited supply and they're waiting for that vehicle, that they are given an exemption till the end of December 2022. We're also proposing some local discounts, primarily for GM licensed private hire vehicle owners who either own or exclusively contract the vehicle for a discounted charge of 5/7 of the weekly total. And that's in recognition of some comments that came through the conversation that people use those as a private family car, and cars aren't included in Greater Manchester's plan. And then we're also proposing discounts for the owners or registered keepers of leisure vehicles that are greater than 3.5 tonnes in private ownership, so that they can apply for the discounted charge of £10 per day. That is for minibuses and LGVs. So if we keep going, just moving on then to the proposals around funding support for vulnerable groups. If we move on, we, Greater Manchester, have requested a package of funding from government that totals over £150 million, and that's to support people upgrade from non-compliant vehicles into compliant vehicles, so those vehicles that don't incur a charge. So far, we've been awarded £41 million, and further awards are anticipated. And the whole aim of that funding is to mitigate the negative social and economic effects on businesses and individuals that would be most affected by the Clean Air Zone. Now, before COVID-19, we were proposing that we needed a hardship fund of at least £10 million to support individuals, companies and organisations that were economically vulnerable to the Clean Air Zone charge. I think with COVID-19 coming along, we're even keener now to understand about the impact of COVID-19 on the Greater Manchester plans. So the consultation is asking lots of questions of, not lots, is asking questions of people about COVID-19, so we can understand the economic impact and we can make sure that the plans that we're putting in place takes account of that. So in terms of the funding to support vulnerable groups, when we had a conversation last year and in the outline business case, we said that we would investigate a scheme to offer loans at preferential rates to people, because that was definitely something that was indicated that people would need to help them upgrade their vehicles. So what we've done is we've developed a vehicle finance measure to help facilitate access to vehicle finance to a wider range of applicants than would ordinarily be the case. So if we move forward, Laura, what essentially that means is that depending on your vehicle type, individuals and businesses who were eligible for support would be able to choose between 3 different things. So they'd either be able to say that they would like to take a non-repayable grant to help them support the purchase, leasing or running costs of a compliant vehicle. And what we're saying is for all vehicles, it's a like-for-like replacement, and you would be replacing a non-compliant vehicle. Or alternatively, you might want to take that money as a contribution to the cost of financing a replacement vehicle through the Greater Manchester scheme. So essentially, we're looking for a panel of vehicle finance providers to do that on our behalf. And what we would be doing is we would be offering an average amount of money that would be the same. Sorry, the average would be about the same as the grant amount, up to a capped limit per vehicle. But alternatively, for some people, the type of vehicle they've got means that there is an accredited retrofit solution, which means that they can actually upgrade the vehicle by doing the retrofit. And so on those situations, we're offering money to help with that retrofit. So if we move forward, I'm not going to go through the proposed support that's available for each type of vehicle. Suffice to say, I would say if you do have a vehicle that falls into one of these groups, I would really encourage you to have a look at the consultation material that's on cleanairgm.com. There are drop-in sessions on, if you go on there to say that you want to talk to somebody, there's also live chat sessions available. So you can have a look, see how much is proposed, ask questions if you need to, and I'd really encourage you to respond to the consultation so we can understand whether your views on those funding amounts. So if we just move forward, there's lots of different types of vehicles that are available. So I did just say that I'd touch on the minimum licensing standards for taxis and private hire services. There's a consultation running in parallel with the Clean Air Plan. So those people that are affected both by the Clean Air Plan and the minimum licensing standards can fully understand the impact on them of the proposals. Because it's been agreed that GM needs to raise the minimum licensing standards across all authorities, and to make sure that visitors and residents see these services as safe and reliable and preferable to those that aren't licensed by the Greater Manchester local authorities. And again, as part of the consultation around minimum licensing standards, we're also asking questions about the impact of COVID-19 on the trade to include that in our final plans. So for all of this, the consultations are running, or have been running since Thursday, the 8th of October. They run for 8 weeks, so they run through till the 3rd of December. People can find out more and give their views either at cleanairgm.com or alternatively GM Taxi Standards. The websites are hosting what's called a virtual engagement space that's available for anybody to go in and have a look at the material that's been put together for people to understand what the proposals are about, because clearly we have to work within the government guidance around social distancing at this time. So if we move forward, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
You talked a lot about COVID. I mean, has this whole process been put back by obviously everybody being in an emergency over the last 6 months?
I think certainly the consultation has been delayed. We anticipated doing a consultation in the summer of this year, and we weren't able to do that. So the GM authorities are under a direction from government to do this work. Government have been very clear that they want to see us consult on the plans that have been developed pre-COVID. We've already committed to do the work to understand what COVID means for the Greater Manchester Clean Air Plan. I think this is why the consultation at this time is really important, to just understand what people think of the proposals and to give their views on the impact of COVID-19 on their businesses. So when decision makers get a final report on the consultation findings and what COVID-19 means, they get a really rich picture, enable them to make some final decisions on that plan.
So it hasn't been used as an excuse for sort of moving away from it by central government in terms of the funding, all money going on to other projects. As far as we're aware, still
£41 million of,
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, £41 million. We've got other funding offers in, and government are really clear that we need to continue with developing a plan. Yeah.
In practical terms, actually, for those particularly people coming into the city every day, how does it how technically is it planned to work? The charging system.
So the charging system, well, the charging system is, as I say, it's going to be a central government portal that is going to be stood up. It's in the process of being developed now, because you probably read online that Birmingham's Clean Air Zone launches in June of next year, and before then it's I want to say Bristol, but it might be Bath. I can't remember off the top of my head. That there's launches a bit earlier. So you'd put your registration number in. You know, there's a vehicle checker on the government website as well that says whether your vehicle is compliant or not, and it would then, we understand, allow you to pay the amount of money that each individual authority is charging for that vehicle type. We would have ANPR cameras that would be deployed across the region to look at the vehicles that were coming into the region. that would then cross-reference against those registration numbers that we record and say need to pay a charge versus what the government portal say have paid the charge, and then there would be a process of administration for those that were found to have not paid and would need to pay.
So we're hoping a government IT system will work smoothly in this particular case. Sorry, my cynical comment.
Yeah, we're watching the development of that, obviously, with great interest.
A couple of questions really around vehicles based outside of Greater Manchester. Is there going to be any funding support for them, or sort of how will that work if they're on the edge of Greater Manchester? I mean, I assume the same happens for Birmingham, Leeds and all the other areas as well. If there's going to be funding for people who are registered within the city or within Greater Manchester, what happens to those who are just on the edge, just outside?
Well, I think this is where we're wanting to hear from you during the consultation, because clearly, as well as saying the amounts of money that we're proposing, we're also setting out the eligibility criteria. At the moment, the eligibility criteria have been developed around supporting smaller Greater Manchester businesses upgrade to compliant vehicles. So if you were on the edge of Greater Manchester, doing a lot of trade with Greater Manchester, we'd want to understand whether you'd need support, and how our plans need to reflect that. So that's why I say it's really important to have your say during this period of time to help develop that final plan. I
guess there's a pretty good case to be made if you are a light haulage company that's just outside Greater Manchester, but 95% of your business is within Greater Manchester, for then hopefully qualifying for that funding or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I guess the question that I asked Jonathan on the same basis is, given COVID, given all the other things that are going on, what are the soundings from government in terms of how confident you are around the funding?
So far, in terms of, if you look at what we've asked for and what we've been given on the vehicle types where they have given us money, it's been there or thereabouts. So, I think so far we've made a pretty robust case for what we need for Greater Manchester. I think that the consultation is just going to support the case that we've made to do that. And I sound like a broken record, but that's why I'm really encouraging people to, engage with that consultation and give us that evidence that supports the case that Greater Manchester does need this funding. And if the evidence is there to say we need more than we've currently got or asked for, I think it just supports our case even more. So it's why it's really important to have you say fill in the questionnaire so we can really understand particularly what COVID-19 means for people, and make that case to government.
Thank you very much. So there's 2 consultations to do if you haven't already done them, and 2 sets of information out there. We will after this distribute the presentations. I'm assuming that's okay. Yep.
I think we'll improve the link to our animation, but yes.
So we have the soundtrack to that as well. That would be nice. Yeah. We will send those round as a link to everybody who is here, and probably put the links on our website as well. I'm looking at Laura while I say that. And this will be available too on our YouTube channel, and again linked through our website citycode.com. Thank you all for joining us. We will be, I'm sure, revisiting both the city centre transport strategy and the clean air plan a number of times over the next few years. But I hope you all learnt a lot, and please respond with comments to the consultations. Thank you very much indeed.